So you are in the military, okay? And you work for some top secret projects, some classified projects, nothing super out there, but again, something that would get you in trouble if, you were to come forward and disclose what you've been working on to the public or something of the sort, right? With that being said, you are then over your career brought into DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, if I'm not mistaken. And so you're brought into a group within DARPA, a subgroup called Advanced Group 6. Now, some of you may in fact actually know about this because Camden recently covered it a handful of days ago. With that being said, we are going to expound on that. But in addition to that, what also ends up happening too, folks, is that when you're brought into this secret group that is designated and poised to reverse engineer this alien technology and material, figure out what it is, you name it, you're then pulled aside one day. You're working in one of these underground military bases. You're pulled aside by your superior and you're told, listen, there's going to be a key phrase of words that will be used if we feel that this group has been compromised. And then you ask, compromised by what? Your superior doesn't even answer you back because, again, this is not really a place you as a subordinate could ask questions to begin with, right? With that being said, before I jump into all this, I do want to say we do have a Patreon. It does help support the show. In addition to that, I would like to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart, the members, the audience, my family, very much my family. Also, in addition to that, Stephanie, Dahlia, Spencer, Alex, you know exactly who you are, especially you, Steph. You've been my backbone through all of this, and I'd like to thank you so much. Now, let's jump right into it. So, Ace in the Hole, exploiting biomorphic paraterrestrials to invert Enochian corpses. Now, for those that watched our live stream last night, as of the date, or depending on the day and time that you're watching this, we actually covered some, I guess you could say, topics that had to do with resurrecting Enoch and Gilgamesh and things like this. And some of you even asked on the live stream, Dave, is there any association? Well, I can tell you there is. So let's jump into it. Let's take a look here. Benfords Law. Again, Wikipedia. Benfords Law, also called the Newcomb-Benford Law, the law of anomalous numbers or the first digit law, is an observation about the frequency distribution of leading digits in many real-life sets of numerical data. The law states that in many naturally occurring collections of numbers, the leading digit is likely to be small. All right? In sets that obey the law, the number 1 appears as the leading significant digit about 30% of the time, while 9 appears as the leading significant digit less than 5% of the time. If the digits were distributed uniformly, they would each occur about 11.1% of the time. Benford's law also makes predictions about the distribution of second digits, third digits, digit combinations, and so on, end quote. Now, you might be saying, Dave, why the hell did you read all that to me? Well, folks, there's a couple key points here that we have to actually notice and sort of retain for the rest of this episode. So you see here about 30% of the time, it appears, the number 1 appears as the leading significant digit about 30% of the time. That has to do with tricking these paraterrestrials into thinking that there is a numerical set of data, I guess that you could say within the light codes in an esoteric dimension that could in fact be harnessed, but in a way that the Draco reptilians are in fact trying to confuse these paraterrestrials. Now you might be saying, whoa, Dave, what do you mean by that? Well, first off, take a look here at Wikipedia when it says about 30% of the time. Notice the reoccurring numbers 3, 6, 9. And if you watched our live stream yesterday, you'll notice too that we covered that allegedly, based on many different texts, ancient scriptures, you name it, there's a consistency that all it takes is about 3% of the general population to transfer mass consciousness in order for there to be a sort of, again, revolution, anarchy, whatever you want to call it. That's not what I'm advocating for, but it seems to be the way in which mass consciousness could be, instead of being redirected from focus, literally be broken free. Now, what are paraterrestrials? I'm very glad all of you folks asked. Let's head to bibliotecaplades.net. Paraterrestrial Code Paramus. Now, again, if we take a look very quickly at the 2001 Disclosure Project, this was also mentioned quite extensively as well, which could corroborate some of what we're going to read here. And I quote, aliens from the multi-universe. The paraterrestrial comes from several different parallel universes from the multi-universe. When they accelerate or decelerate the frequency of vibration of their atomic structure, they are able to exist at our third dimension. This information was recovered from IAC 26, blah, 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 as well as other crash sites and things like this. However, it says here, we can't tell much about these beings because we don't have enough data about it yet, end quote. Now, take a look at some of the symbols next to this particular image here, drawing from the Blue Planet Project document. They claim that they don't have anything on or any data on these creatures, but the reason for that is because, again, if you do not know within yourself that you do not know something. I know that might sound a little bit confusing. It is a non-inversion. Therefore, it is something, I guess you could say, similar to that of the film Tenet, right? Where it is sort of a paradox. There is no answer. Are you moving forward in time or backwards? Or is there a sort of inversion that uses the instinctual level of consciousness to allow for this to occur? Now, we're just getting started, by the way, folks. Let's take a look at this right here. BreakingDefense.com. Exclusive. Pentagon poised to unveil and demonstrate classified space weapon. The push to declassify an existing space weapon is being spearheaded by General John Hyten, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, end quote. Now, again, we all know realistically the military-industrial complex, really runs things. So this general would not be putting his whole career, his pension on the line if those behind the scenes were pulling this, were not telling him what to do or things like this. But take a look at this right here. And I quote, "For months, top officials at the Defense Department have been working toward declassifying the existence of a secret space weapon and providing a real-world demonstration of its capabilities," Breaking Defense has learned. All right, anyways, long story short, end quote, it has to do with satellite technology and I guess you could say direct energy weapons. But the main significant point here is that this is not to demonstrate to humans what could be done. This is to take advantage of the paraterrestrials' different forms, I guess you could say, of how they enter this dimension to try to, we could use the word, narrow down a focus on what exactly is being used for what is being used here. Case in point, let's take a look at some footage that I'll be putting up while I'm continuing the episode of a ball of light just breaking into people's homes. And you could see it's clearly physically manifesting itself. And also there's some previous security camera footage too of what looks to be interdimensional beings walking on streets and things like this. So you might be saying, why are they revealing this weapon now? What does that have to do with what's being discussed here? When you reveal a space weapon to the point in which enough of, give or take 3% of the population is not focused on it, but is aware of it, even subconsciously, you can then divert a form of resurrecting Enochian beings through paraterrestrial science, not through the beings themselves, but harnessing the capabilities that are being used. So let's take a look at this right here. You see this right here, folks, thenewearth.org. What we're looking at is a very simple picture. I'm sure many of you have seen it, an alleged drawing of Agartha and the land of the races and things like this. Now, Admiral Byrd had said that flying discs were coming from both poles, right? The North Pole, the South Pole, all that, right? With that being said, take a look at the way in which we could invert this in accordance with Benfords Law. And the reason why I bring this up is because this has to do with, again, Advanced Group 6. If there is a point in which anyone working within DARPA at Advanced Group 6 feels that any of this paraterrestrial time inversion technology is being used on them, that is when they use the keyword ace in the hole. What does ace in the hole do? I know this sounds like something out of a movie. Ace in the hole essentially resurrects different Gilgameshes and I guess you could say Enochian beings in order to suppress a paradimensional invasion. Now you might be saying, Dave, what other examples are there of paradimensional beings? Again, the insectoids very strongly could be argued as some of them. Notice how the insectoids, whether it's through military data or within the public domain of information, they suddenly appear like they do in Turkey or on, in Japan or China, and then all of a sudden they disappear. Again, paraterrestrial, they're going from one dimension to another. But the real reason I bring this up is because of this right here, something called OSORIS. And I quote, this is from soulsearch.org, not exactly mainstream media website. The existence of an ancient pre-fall Earth grid was known in the early millennia of the post-fall times. The known existence of this grid, along with other ancient maps of the planet before it shifted off its alignment to true, suggests that the Earth's shift was a deliberate act. The records indicate that it was intentional, end quote. Now, if we take a look at where alleged nuclear bombs have gone off many thousands of years ago, it does in fact line up with the historical accordance to what's being stated here. With that being said, let's take a look at this right here, abcnews.go.com. Again, this is mainstream media now. Bidder offers up to $120 million for collapsed condo site. Again, you might be saying, Dave, what does this have to do with anything? Well, this collapsed condo allegedly, was also a property owned by John McAfee, which interestingly enough collapsed only a handful of days after he was allegedly suicided. Right now, this is not a McAfee episode, but what we need to understand here is that take a look at this right here. And I quote, a private bidder is willing to offer up to $120 million to purchase the Miami area oceanfront property where the collapsed Champlain Towers South building once stood. The offer was revealed Wednesday during a hearing before Circuit Judge Michael Hansman, who is overseeing the dozens of lawsuits that have been filed since the condo collapsed, killing 98 people. End quote. Now, The key thing here, folks, is this right here. Circuit Judge Michael Hansman. I have to be very careful. I'm not trying to, discredit or disfame this judge. We're going to go more into it on our Patreon to discuss. But if you look at some of the connections, particularly if you come join us on Patreon for tomorrow's members episode, you're going to see the way in which this particular judge has so many connections to the funding of institutes that seem to be the same, that are in fact the same institutes that, again, are funded by the Rockefellers, are funded by the Rothschilds, are funded by George Soros. The institutions that seem to also pick and choose which science and which form of archaeology and history they want to analyze and which ones they want to ignore. But anyways, let's carry on over here. The Debrief.org. Scientists convert light into matter and antimatter. New study confirms. What's interesting about this is that it seems as though, again, according to many military whistleblowers, the equations for anti-gravity and for accessing the etheric realms using the same type of apparatus, and I don't want to say technology, but apparatus that these paradimensional beings are using seem to be slowly coming to light, and I don't think it's because of human disclosure. It could, in fact, be because of forced alien disclosure. But let's take a look. And I quote, Albert Einstein's famously elegant E equals mc squared equation taught the world about the direct relationship between energy and matter. The theory is proven daily by the power generation mechanism operating within our sun, a conversion of matter directly into energy through the process of nuclear fusion, end quote. Now, you want to notice something interesting as well, too? Nuclear fusion. You want to know who has the most amount of patents within Lockheed Martin that has to do with nuclear fusion pertaining to anti-gravity? Boyd Bushman, again, who's now dead. The same gentleman on his deathbed who said there are aliens, showed pictures, and then a handful of months later, all of a sudden these aliens started appearing as toys in Kmart's, Walmart's, in an attempt, to discredit Mr. Bushman, right? With that being said, let's take a look at this right here, abovetopsecret.com. According to Richard Dolan, some leaked info from the classified version of the UAP report mentions Advanced Group 6. Again, now, the other thing too, end quote, before I go on, just a quick recap for those who don't know. If you go to advancedgroup6.com, again, it depends where you are in the world, VPN, IP address, things like this, but if you go to advancedgroup6.com, it quickly goes to a 1995 login of a Nevada area test site website, which we don't know who owns the rights to that, but then quickly, if you don't see that, very quickly it then jumps to the Lockheed Martin advanced weaponry part of their website. Quite interesting, isn't it? That's also consistent with the Admiral Wilson EG&G documents of confirming essentially that Lockheed Martin was in fact this contractor. Now, that was doing some of the best work out there with regards to reverse engineering alien technology. With that being said, when we take a look and we take a step back at how we see the way in which these Enochian bodies could be resurrected, it really makes us think. And you might be saying, okay, Dave, what do you mean by that? Well, CNN.com. A crucial ocean circulation is showing signs of instability. Its shutdown would have serious impacts on our weather, end quote. Now, we can talk about the climate change narrative, the agenda, how much of it's real, how much of it's fake, but the overall goal here is to push for a climate change reversal because of the inversion that these paradimensional species are, I guess you could say, conducting themselves in, because the military does not know when they will show up, where they will show up. They generally, according to multiple whistleblowers, like to appear in vast areas of land, which is why lately, again, too, the U.S. has been conducting very interesting military experiments, to say the least. Very unexpected, last minute. People's phones in certain parts of the West are getting text messages about a potential real bomb threat warning or an explosion, a blast, and disappears, and they say, oh, false alarm, don't worry about it. Again, so many different things. But anyways, let's take a look at this right here. Alienbabble.com. This is a screenshot from the alleged classified version of the UAP report. Now, bear with me, folks. I've been gone for about a month, give or take, so we're just catching up here. But ultimately, take a look. The classified portion of the UAP report given to a select number of congressmen and senators relates to the following: Energy Pulse Propulsion Systems, the Kaesong Energy Propulsion System Research Project, advanced use of exotic elements for energy research, compressed nuclear propulsion systems, ramjet hydrogen propulsion systems, antimatter, anti-gravity, ion propulsion, all of this. This is exactly how, end quote, this is exactly how the different forms of paradimensional extraterrestrials are using humans to disseminate this form of information in order for a resurrection of Enochian beings to occur. And because these Enochian beings are resurrected, doesn't necessarily mean that it is fully within, I guess you could say, this particular dimension, if you will. And I say that because, again, if we take a look at patents.justia.com, again, patents by inventor Boyd B. Bushman, as I was mentioning. Let's take a look at some of the patents. System and method for electromagnetic propulsion fan. All right. Variable radio angled magnetic drive, method and apparatus for detecting emitted radiation from interrupted electrons. Again, they are just stopping short of essentially saying there is an etheric realm, an esoteric realm that could be accessed, not just by humans, but by multiple, I guess you could say, extraterrestrials, beings, ultra-terrestrials, paraterrestrials, you name it. Because at the end of the day, when we take a look here at sadfenza.blogspot.com, an Italian website that was translated, thankfully enough, we can see some of the leaked classified documents pertaining, as we see here, top secret assessment of the situation, segment of position on unidentified flying objects. We can see that some of these documents pertain to the science behind the way in which the craft activate the energy around it. Now, let's take a look here too. Humanoids similar to Terrans, small humanoids or grays, umoid EBEs, transmorphic entities. Again, of all the forms of EBE that Operation Majestic has studied so far, these are the most difficult to understand or even describe. In essence, such entities are not beings or creatures. They exist in some other dimension or plane, which is to say they are not in our space or time. They do not use devices and they do not travel in space. Basically, these entities are composed of pure energy. It is said by other EBEs that they are able to take on any physical form and that they channel their energy into matter. End quote. Now again, is this not consistent with what we're seeing with the disclosure of some of the leaks with regards to UAP reports and things like this? Now, this also lines up very interestingly enough with the OSORIS grid that is perpendicular to the date, according to WikiLeaks, that Hillary Clinton requested the resurrection of Gilgamesh, which is also interesting because, again, we have to look at the way in which the resurrection of Enoch and Gilgamesh and these different beings or giants, whatever you want to call them, human giants, hybrid alien giants, could actually factor into the real world, which, again, we're going to notice too very soon. We're going to see that the Russia and the United States are going to be going to Antarctica in a way that is very hard to hide, if you want to call it. So it's very difficult in order for these paraterrestrials to be able to, I guess you could say, reveal themselves without there being a full form of, I guess, acknowledgement. I don't want to say disclosure, but acknowledgement. So let's take a look. Look at this right here. Latest UFO sightings.net. Amazing spheres with strange beings inside. Take a look at this right here, folks. I'm going to put the video up as I'm speaking still, but look at this. This is another example of the way in which this technology is used and harnessed by aliens, by humans, for different esoteric purposes to resurrect different forms of Enochian bodies. Now, what they then do is they take within these underground military bases the nervous system structure of the Enochian bodies and they place them down onto, again, very similar, something that I mentioned a few months ago. Parents, if you have kids in the room listening to this, I suggest you don't. Give it a few seconds. They then put the nervous systems on a very, I guess we could say, esoteric version of a rape rack. But instead of them doing it to say, you know how they put cows on a rape rack in order to, you know, increase the birth rate and things like this, they do it in a very different way, similar to that of how you would place, I guess, very similar to the film Prometheus, how you would see things light up, but it looks and feels like stone. When you place a nervous system onto this particular table, I guess we can call, or a very large tablet of stone, if you will, what then happens is that a paradimensional entity via the research team of Advanced Group 6 then helps to resurrect through the manifestation of energy through these beings as well. That if we take a look here, for example, at timefordisclosure.com, jellyfish-shaped UFO recorded by Captain Kate McHugh tend to start to show up. However, here's the thing though, end quote. It's not a UFO. It is in fact an entity and or being of itself, which is why, again, even though, you know, the CIA, Advanced Group 6, DARPA, NASA, you name it, all JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they just let them do their thing when they're up in the sky. Because again, if they're not harming anyone, people can speculate. But again, the propaganda and we could say Operation Mockingbird was so successful that it's become so ingrained within society that, again, if the government doesn't say it's real, the majority of people won't believe it. But again, going back to Benfords Law, if there is a way in which we can attain roughly 3% of a general mass population to, in fact, repel or rebel, if you want to call it, it's a very different story. Now, the final thing I wanted to cover here is scitechdaily.com. Advanced new artificial intelligence software can compute protein structures in 10 minutes. Now, notice something, folks, end quote. This is a form of drop feeding within the way that this article, and I guess you could say propagandized article, actually uses and disseminates the propaganda to our minds. And how does it do that? Look at the way this illustration, I know it's just a Photoshop drawing, but this is very sophisticated propaganda, folks. This is being done right here because of the fact that we actually need to envision within our subconscious a sort of biomorphic, right, as said in the title, a biomorphic type of creature or technology that could be harnessed, similar to some of the groups of the Ebens that Eisenhower met in the 1954 Greada Treaty. So with that being said, let me know what you folks think, and we'll catch all of you very, very soon. Cheers.